Hello everyone, and welcome back to the next video on the first week of Introduction to C Programming. So this is the lab, the online lab at least. So one of the things that we're going to talk about is we talked about in our lecture, let's slide this over here. We talked about printing variables. So we talked about when you use the %d for integer, use a %f for a float, and I'll show you what I mean. So a lot of us know that within Java, how we print stuff. So what we're going to do is we're going to pretend that we're using Java and we're going to print and see if it works. And I'll show you if it doesn't work, then we'll go from there. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to, let's see here, what am I doing? 1 second. I thought I had this created here, but we'll just leave it like this. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to create maybe a calculator, for example. Something pretty simple, but it'll be a hard-coded calculator. So the first thing that we need to do is declare variables. Okay, so as you see here, I'm doing some type of text right here, comments, so that way when you come into code, you have an idea what's going on. So let's say that we have two numbers. We'll say we give it an integer. We'll say number. Well, let's see. Number 1. Not a good name to use, but whatever. We want to initialize with a 0 value, and I'll tell you why. Because if we would have did int number 1 and it went like that, that's fine. We can set a variable, but you're not initializing it. You're not setting it to something. Because if you go and add two numbers up that don't exist, and we'll kind of try that at some point. Let's just actually do it and see what happens. So if we went int number 2 like that. So we declared the two variables. We did int number 1 and number 2. So what we want to do is we want to add the two up. So let's get another one that we could use. So we'll say int and we'll say summary. Okay, and we won't even initialize those. Now if we did summary equals number 1 plus number 2. All right, so we did summary equals number 1 plus number 2. Now to print it, I'll show you what's going to happen here. So in normal in Java, we would just say, hey, you know what? Plus number 1 or summary. Okay, because what we're doing here is we're declaring three variables: number 1, number 2, and summary. We're saying they're all integers. They're going to be numeric values, but we're not initializing them on purpose. Now down here, we're doing the summary, which is basically taking the two values, adding them together, and this variable is going to hold the answer of these two. Now here's the thing, we didn't set them. We're going to see what happens. In addition to that, we have printf hello world new line plus summary. Okay, we're going to see what happens there as well. Okay, now we're going to run it. Yeah, hit yes. It did nothing because it doesn't know what the heck to do here. Fine. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do something different. We're going to set it up the proper way and see what happens then. So now what we're going to do here is, let's just start over here. We're going to say print f. We're going to say the answer to your math problem. Oh, we'll just make it too complicated. We'll say the answer is, and then space, and we'll do percentage D, because that's what we wanted to use, new line, then we'll do comma, and we'll do summary. So what we're doing here actually is we're using the print function. We're giving an argument saying, here's what we want you to print. We want you to say the answer is percentage D, because percentage D is something, it's a function that you use that allows you to display a variable to print it. And then that variable is this guy right here called summary. So whatever that answer is. Now let's see what happens, because we also, real quick, is we want to do the return. We don't want to return 0, we want to return summary. So we'll type in summary here. Now we're going to run it. We shouldn't get anything because we didn't set any variables yet. We didn't initialize it. So if we run it, you see error exists in the required project. Continue launch. See down here, it blew up because it didn't know what to do with it because we didn't initialize it. I'm going to say, yeah, sure, why not? See, it blew up right away. And at least it gave you an error message telling you what's going on. It says, hey, something's going on here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to do a couple things. When you initialize it, you could set your value here, or you could come down here and set your value. So you don't have to set it up there. You could say number 1 equals 2. Number 2 equals 5. And then summary equals 0. So this is one way of doing it. Declaring it, setting the variables. Okay. All right, so now we set the variables. Now we have an answer. Let's see if we run it now and see what happens. Let's save it first. Error exists. No. All right, print NF. Okay, what is going on here? Comma. Let me see something here. No, and then we say summary, and then end it. All right, so now let's see if this, we'll clear this time. Let's see if it works now. Run it. All right, cool. Summary is 57. So added 55 and 52. Now that's one way you could do it. All right. Now as you see here, we had what? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 8, 9 lines of code. And you could do it that way. It's not a problem. Here's another way you can do it as well. So let's say that we wanted those. You know how like we declared it 3 times? Let's say we wanted to change it up a little bit. We could declare it one time and say number 2 and summary. And well, yeah, and end it like that. See what you're doing here is you're saving one line. You're doing a bunch of integers, number 1, number 2, and summary. You're only using one semicolon because you're consolidating it all together. You could do that. Now what if you say you had another variable and this was going to be a float or something like that? You could do it that way. You can't do it that way because it doesn't end. You can't have 2 and then something else. It has to end then. But in this case, you're using the same variable and you're declaring the same one. You could just go straight across like that. There's your answer. We have our variable set like that. Another way is you could just declare it down here. So if you wanted to have, if we had different ones, say we had int number 3 equals 222. If we had int number 5, actually 4 equals 1000, and if we had int number 788, let's do 68 equals 68. Okay. Oops, 68. You could declare your variables that way as well. So we have, actually, let me see here. Yeah, so you could declare it this way and then add it right there and have everything on that line. What you can't do is go straight across. So let's add some more information to this since we have some variables there. So now we'll say, hey, you know what? Take that number, times it by number 4 divided by number 68. A lot of stuff going on there. And then we'll say your answer is, and then we'll run it. Let's save it. Hit play. There you go. Your answer is 810. So that is a way that you display integers. It's a way that you could print them, how we did it there with integers. We could do the same thing with floats as well. Floats you're going to use is an F. Now here's the thing, if we put %F and we run what we have right now, Hit yes. It's going to blow up. It doesn't have an answer because it can't find a float because we have integers up here. Now, if we change this to float, let's copy this. Excuse me. Hit play, yes, run. Now it works because you're using a float. Now, notice the difference. Integer is a whole number, so it's always going to round it up. Whereas a float uses decimal. So it doesn't give you the whole number. It gives you, like 810 gave us 810. Actually, if you round it up, it could be 811. So it gives 0.823547. So a float could be used for a decimal. If you're using money in some type of sense, you will use this versus maybe an integer. It's a good example of what you can use. See, another thing is I just changed this return. We had summary originally. If we run summary and we run this float here, run, we get 810, 823547. Now I could hit 0 and do the same thing. It works perfectly fine. Now if I take this out and don't print it and hit return 0, what happens? It returns nothing because you're not printing anything to the line. Same thing here is if I return summary, we know summary has a variable to it, so we're good there. We run it, I keep hitting save. It returns nothing because we're not printing anything to the screen. You have to print something to the screen in order to show something on the screen. The return statement would only work is if we say we had a method called a method, and this is the method, and it gave the variable, and then we had an instance called the method, and we returned summary. In the instance, we could just take that value and print it that way. But in this case, we're not doing that. So this is just an example of how to compute calculations. Like on page, I think it's page 40 of the lecture, we talk about computing the dimensional weight of a box. And we'll actually do that in our lab in class to go through it, just to let you guys get some practice. But this week is just talking about the basics. We just want to be able to open up Eclipse, create our first class. We want to be able to declare variables, set variables. We want to be able to print our expressions using both a float and using an integer. Trying to think what else. Let's see here. 1 second. Let's hit on that part, and we'll make another video and talk about the scanf function here shortly. Thanks for listening.